How's everybody doing?
Great.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Quick show of hands, who has used Sandstorm before? That's most people in the room. Who has never heard of Sandstorm before and is like here to learn more? Wow, okay, that's a very different result than the Boston meetup from a week ago.
Well, I think everyone here has heard of it,
Okay.
used it.
You used it. Okay.
Has anyone not used Sandstorm? Okay.
Okay, we have a couple. All right, then doing the early demo is worthwhile. So I just wanted to open with, we have a code of conduct. We want everyone to feel like anything involving Sandstorm is a safe environment. If you want to read up on that, the link is here. Everyone should feel like this is a safe space. Cool. All right, who am I? I am Drew Fisher. I am one of the 7 members of the Sandstorm core team. I have always, as far as I can remember, been a usability and security enthusiast and a freedom enthusiast. Before coming and joining Sandstorm, I worked at AeroFS building secure file sync software for private cloud. And before that, I studied security and human-computer interaction with Dave Wagner and Bjorn Hartman at UC Berkeley. So that's a little bit about me. In my free time, I like to do puzzle hunts and eat delicious foods. Any of you do the MIT mystery hunts? Talk to me about that later. Let's see, so what is Sandstorm? Sandstorm is, there's a lot of ways we can describe it, but perhaps one of the better ones is an open source operating system for personal and private clouds. In a way, it's kind of like Android for servers in that we want to make it really easy to be able to run arbitrary web apps that the users might want to install. We want to make it so that you can be in control of what software is serving you. There was a very sad situation when Google Reader shut down, and suddenly all these people, many of whom would probably have been willing to pay for Google Reader, could no longer use the product because they could no longer pay for the ongoing cost of the operating of the service. So Sandstorm is different. Sandstorm lets the end users be responsible for the operational costs and upkeep of the server. To make that practical, it has to be really, really low maintenance, and it has to be something that's approachable for everyone. So we'll do a quick demo. Just to show off what Sandstorm is, and I'll log out before doing that. So if you want to follow along on your laptop, demo.sandstorm.io. We'll get started. Okay, so we have a list of apps. There's nothing in it yet because we haven't installed any apps, but we can install some apps from the app market. And Etherpad, raise your hand if you've heard of Etherpad before. Raise your hand if you haven't heard of Etherpad before. Okay, that's everyone. Amazing. There were, okay. Etherpad is a real-time collaborative document editor, somewhat akin to Google Docs. So we'll install Etherpad. So let's count the clicks. We had 1 to start the demo, 1 to go to the App Store, or App Market, 1 to select the app that we wanted to install. And now we'll see that this was prepared by Kenton. We actually cryptographically verify this app package all the way back to Kenton's GitHub and Twitter identities. So we can say with confidence that the person that owns those identities is in fact the person that produced this package. And with a 4th click, we can install Etherpad, and we can create a new pad. 5 clicks. So in 5 clicks, we have taken a piece of server software and brought up our own instance in like a minute and a half. This is pretty great. Yeah. So we feel that basically every kind of software should be something that is as approachable for end users as this. And to make that a reality, there are some implementation details. So, some other Sandstorm features: you can share access with colleagues. You can receive notifications about updates. It's very, very straightforward. So the topic of this this night's presentation: what is a Powerbox? What is this Powerbox thing, and why would I want one? And to really understand that, we kind of have to go back and take a broader look at the context that this lives in, which is, how do you ask for permission? So if you want the software to be something that is accountable to the end user, then you need the end user to be in charge of what that software can or can't do. And from one of my colleagues from Berkeley's work, we have a pretty good sense for the right ways to ask for permission. In particular, you want to minimize the amount of cognitive load on the user in as many situations as possible. And you want to make it clear what you're actually asking for. So her work prioritizes the mechanism that you should use to ask for permission into 4 different classes based on what kind of permission you're asking for. And so those 4 are implicitly granting that permission, if it's something safe enough to do so. TrustedUI, where there is something that you interact with that the system understands to be indicating a desire to share this permission, and so it can become part of the user's workflow. Runtime approval request, think like location access requests in response to you using a Maps app or something, or upfront requests at install time. And so in Sandstorm, we start out by denying all permissions, and then granting permissions where users find it appropriate. And that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you can say the apps are able to do, and some pretty strong security and isolation guarantees. So implicit grants are something that you can only do if you don't have a horse breaks past the barn door problem, because once you've shared information with a malicious app, you can't get it back again. So implicit grants are generally something that are only safe if the user can undo the action and there's like no longer term consequence. The nice part about this is the user doesn't have to think about it until something bad has happened. And if you present good UI for being able to roll that back or opt out of whatever was the permission that was granted to deny it later, then most of the time everything just works. Users don't have to think about it, apps don't have to encounter additional friction. A few examples, like if you had a phone and you were setting the background image of that, an app is only going to be able to make you unhappy about that once, and you can very quickly recover from that by setting a new background image. So this is a pretty safe permission to grant by default. TrustedUI. TrustedUI, I mentioned before, was when the platform provides and renders some sort of interface that is the only way to obtain that permission, that privilege. And the upside of that is that since users are already going through their workflow, they're already going to try to connect one thing to another, the permission grant falls out of their workflow. And so they don't really have to think about the permission grant so much as just thinking about what they were trying to do. The security falls out naturally. It's something that doesn't get in the way. It just works for the user. And so this requires that the platform be designed in such a way that the only way to accomplish the thing that you want to do is through this trusted UI. So another example from mobile phones of something that could probably benefit from trusted UI would be sending SMS. Right now, in Android world, there is a permission that lets you send and receive arbitrary SMS. But perhaps that could have been done better by having an input box which lets you select a contact or a phone number, and then lets you embed that somewhere else in other apps, but that is still the only way that you can actually deliver SMS to have them be actually sent. Runtime requests, again, the location example is one of my favorites because a lot of the time apps will ask for location and it's not clear what they need it for up front. So it's like, why does my bank want to know where I am? And then you realize, well, if it asked for that in the context of you just asked to find ATMs near me, then, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's something that I want. And so this makes sense for users. It's lower cognitive load. But when you're asked without that context, then users are more likely to be confused, become unhappy, deny the request, and then not get to use the great feature that your app has implemented. So runtime requests, the upside is that they give context to the user. And lastly, upfront requests. Try to reserve these for situations where the user is not around to answer the permission prompt. So things that need to be set in motion in advance. The canonical example for this is the Find My Phone or Remote Wipe functionality. That's something that the person that stole your phone is not going to say okay to the permission prompt.
Crooks are dumb.
Yeah. not reliably. So how does this all fit in with Sandstorm? In Sandstorm, apps run confined by default. They have no network access. They have no direct access to data from other apps, other users, other instances of the same app. But we want to be able to let them connect to each other in useful, functional ways. And we do that through fine-grained permission grants over cap and proto capabilities. So the Powerbox is our take on generalized TrustedUI for arbitrary app-defined interfaces. Apps can specify that they want to request this particular interface, or that they can provide a handle to an instance of something that will implement this particular interface. And if you have an expressive enough type system, as cap and proto does, then you can represent these in such a way that Sandstorm itself can recognize when two app instances would be able to share that sort of interface. And so that's what we do. We have two workflows that we are focusing on supporting right now, the Inline Powerbox and the Picker Powerbox. The Inline Powerbox is something that requires per interface Sandstorm support because Sandstorm actually has to capture the user's input to make sure that it came from a user and wasn't generated by an app that wants to pretend to be a user. Remember, it's okay to grant permission as long as a user has said that that is their intent in some way, or expressed that. But we don't want systems to be able to impersonate users in that way. So the way this works is you have an input box that you would like to be able to receive additional capabilities, like the ability to email a person, or the ability to make a outgoing connection to a link that the user entered. The app then asks Sandstorm to capture input by sending a JavaScript post message to Sandstorm. And then, so Sandstorm steals focus. The app, the user types in keys, and the platform echoes these keystrokes back to the app over post message as well. But if you happen to enter something that matches one of these patterns that we can convert into a capability, a permission to access that server that you typed the link to, for instance, then we will also post message back that capability handle. And so the example with links, the goal is that this would be something that would let you embed, you could paste your link to your GitHub repo, and the app itself could go out, fetch that index page, and be able to present some useful metadata about that page. Maybe what that repo's description is, something like that. And the pull request at the bottom is Jason's excellent work in this direction.
Is it merged?
It is not yet merged, so warning, vaporware. But,
you have a screenshot or an example up here?
It looks like just normal input box. So
Yeah, so
Just a text box? I mean, but what are you entering? Because entering a URL is a real pain. I mean,
well, if you paste it, then
Okay.
that enters it
Okay,
in, and
it's
the
pasted.
platform will.
okay.
But another
observe that as
example
well.
is you type an email address, and then that implies giving the app
Yeah,
permission
okay.
to email that person.
Fine.
So that's the inline Powerbox. The other side of this, the one that is more generalizable to arbitrary interfaces, is the picker Powerbox. This is the one where an app requests a capability that matches an interface, and then the platform, the Sandstorm UI, can show which grains, that's the name of app instances, or if there is a Sandstorm implementation itself, what can provide that capability. So one example of this might be, I would like to embed a file in this Hacker Slides presentation. So if I wanted to request I could request through the Powerbox, I would like something that implements this file interface that is defined outside of Sandstorm. And then Sandstorm would look and see, okay, which grains have claimed that they might be able to provide that a capability with that interface. And so it would see that maybe Davros, the file sync app, has declared that it can provide that kind of interface. So then it will list all of your Davros grains in a list, and then the user can select which app instance they want to pull this data from. The shell will then show embedded a UI of that app instance to let you select which specific file you want to offer a handle for. And then the user selects that, and the Davros instance could offer that file capability, and then your Slides app could consume that. And then we've connected these two apps. Sandstorm itself didn't have to know anything in particular about the interface, other than that these two apps both are interested in this kind of interface. And the user was the one that picked what went where. Another example, the one that I've been working on. Question?
What are some examples of the kinds of file type or negotiation that's actually going on here? I mean, URL is a pretty straightforward one. Are there others?
For the picker Powerbox?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty extensible. So one of the examples is a handle to basically a sharing link. So if you wanted to be able to pass on access, so you've got a chat app and then you've got a document. And you want to be able to send a link to the document app in the chat app. And you want it to be so that if someone loses their access to the chat app because they left the company, they also lose access to the document that was linked from there. That's another situation where the picker Powerbox would be suitable. You would pick the entire app instance that you want, the whole grain to offer there.
Is there a way in this that I can see what grants I've made?
There will be vaporware warning. It does not exist, but we understand that being able to go back and revoke these grants is another essential piece of being able to make grants. So one last example, raw network access. Because apps are denied raw network access by default, a app would need to be able to request it so that it could listen on a socket or make direct outgoing connections if it hadn't been handed one of those other more fine-grained capabilities from the picker Powerbox or something like that. So I wanted to do a limited demo, assuming I didn't break anything, on the train up of the picker Powerbox. So I have a test app which I've been developing along with this feature.
That's number 50.
50, oh yeah, 50 apps, yeah. And it can make a request for an instance of another app, and I could pick any of these grains that I happen to have, and I can pick what permission I want to grant along with this grain. I'll say editor, and I'll connect, and so this is a representation of the token that this app received that handled to be able to offer access to that EtherCalc spreadsheet that I gave this app. And so if I were to share this page with another user, via a link, switch to Bob, and then follow this link. Then if I were to click this button, then ideally it would prompt me to actually say, yes, I want to open that, but I now have this access to this EtherCalc spreadsheet. I can load it, I can see what's in it, and that is the capability transfer.
Cool.
So, thank you. So there's still a bunch of open questions or things that we haven't figured out exactly how they're going to work yet. One of these was, as Alan mentioned, how to present a good audit interface for this. The capability graph becomes a graph, and graphs are kind of hard to visualize. So that'll be an interesting open question. How to make this embedding work well on mobile. It's when you have very limited space, it becomes hard to draw UIs within UIs and have that remain very usable. So that'll be interesting.
We have examples of both of those on our
Okay.
Scoops and Everywhere projects.
Excellent. I would love to talk to you later about
Yeah.
those. Whether to allow nested requests. So what if I made a request for a grain or a file, and that file providing app wanted to make a request for something else? How deep can you let these go? And is it better for users if you don't even recurse at all, because then it just becomes more consistent? So that's an open question. And then what are all the possible types that the inline Powerbox should support, since those do need to get special handling from the Sandstorm shell?
I can give an example where nesting would be useful.
Yeah.
So you have one app that's requesting a picture, and the picture you want to end up using is some transformation of some other picture. Like you want to take two other pictures and paste them together and then grant that. So first you choose to fill the initial request, you choose the picture editor app, and then from there you're going to have it request the other pictures, which you then put together. So then you have like a stack. Now, whether or not that's a good user experience, I don't know, but it's plausible.
I think CapDesk has some examples, and it's quite natural for the user.
All right.
If you look at
Okay.
CapDesk.
Cool.
Well, if it worked for CapDesk.
Well, I don't know, we'll have to see. Because they had much simpler examples, because it was basically just files in their picker, but.
Okay. Cool. And that's all I have for now. I'd love to take any questions that you may have.
So you said that you wanted to make sure this request was coming from a human and not an app. Why?
I want to make sure that the grant of authority is coming from a human.
Right, so if I have an app over here that's asking for permission, and I pop up a picker over here, right? What app could possibly get to the picker, except one that maybe the user had granted access to the picker to act on my behalf?
If you allow apps to make requests without having to have the user grant the app permission to make requests, then...
No, I'm saying,
sorry.
as, I have a picker, and I run an application on the side that I grant permission to use the picker on my behalf.
He scripted his browser to answer the Powerbox request.
That's right.
Okay.
And the answer, I think, is
Simultaneous translation, you know us old guys.
I think the answer is that's fine. You can do that.
Okay.
We weren't saying that you can't.
Well, because that actually handles the recursive request. Because I could grant the application permission to grant ask for a subset of additional permissions, right, as part of the grant.
How does the second app express which, or like, it doesn't know the capabilities
I have no
that
idea.
it needs to receive
I have
until
no
they've been
idea.
offered by the third.
Look, Confucius say, never architect standing on one foot. Your house will fall down and so will you.
All right. Thank you.
I was just curious what sort of initial use cases you guys were targeting.
See, so the embed link to other instance of an app is a big one. The connect to network is another big one, because without that you can't run some interesting classes of applications like Minecraft. It listens on a socket, but if you can't listen on a socket, then you can't actually run that on Sandstorm.
Compare documents? I opened it with one document, I want to compare it with
that would
another.
be cool. Jade's favorite is this concept of tabify, where you could create arbitrary mixes of UIs that you keep together in a group, or like a folder of, I want to give, like when I'm onboarding somebody to my company, I want them to get access to a bunch of things all at once. So be able to share multiple capabilities.
to aggregate them all into
Aggregate.
a folder using Powerbox requests, and then share the whole folder to them.
I have kind of a follow-on question, which is like, how are you guys planning on incentivizing like application developers to take advantage of these cool new capabilities?
Application developers seem to be excited about it.
Yeah.
Like the developer of Wecan is excited about being able to implement attachments, being able to attach other Sandstorm grains to cards in this way, or mention other users across the whole Sandstorm server, not just users that have been to that Wecan grain, which is another thing that will be enabled through this.
I'll add my 2 cents to that, which is that if Sandstorm can make an end user's life easier, then that is the reward. More people will use your software, and more people will have a better time and be able to accomplish more with your software. So,
I suppose it's also fair to say that we're sort of strong-arming app developers into this
That's what I was gonna say.
by not giving them network access in the first place. So, but ultimately, it's better for the user that way.
I've written several sharing apps, not on Sandstorm, but I can't imagine how I could make it usable without a Powerbox pattern.
You see Powerbox patterns showing up by accident all the time.
like the file picker for a web browser, when you have an input type equals file, that is strictly speaking a Powerbox. The browser doesn't get to ask, I want that thing. The browser asks, give me a thing, and then the user picks which thing you give it.
And importantly, the website only gets access to the thing you picked and never knows about all the things you didn't pick.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the inline Powerbox UI, what is the expectation of the user experience for that? Is it important to have a user see that they are getting Sandstorm as the UI intermediate, or is that not something that they need to see?
I think that for the inline Powerbox, more desirable is that it feels like just an ordinary text input, except for the moment where that capability grant occurs. You want the user to have some ambient awareness. I just granted permission in some way, and this is the place that I would go to audit that or revoke that later.
Right.
So being able to flash the Powerbox icon in the Sandstorm top bar would be...
Is that essentially what we get? So like if I had a chat clone that wants to do link embedding, I would type in the link, the entire like text box UI is styled by the chat app because it has almost religious fervor about that style. And the only thing that happens is something blinks in the corner.
No, so it's autocomplete. So think about like when you're on Facebook and you start typing your friend's name and then you get an autocomplete box and you select them and they become a link instead of just text of their name. Now it's just a thing you can click on. That's essentially embedding a capability to your friend into this post, and we're generalizing that.
Yeah. But I don't think it matters, because if the app just has a text field that's not connected to that's not a Powerbox text field, no harm, can't do any harm. And if it is a Powerbox, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Like mines Sandstorm.
Yeah, because it won't have the permission to grant the permission, so it won't get to the Powerbox
Well,
because it's internal.
You're talking about an app can't mimic this UI,
Same,
because
that's right.
mimicking it, trying to spoof it doesn't work because the app doesn't have the capability to spoof it. But I think
No, but it can put up a text
It
field
doesn't
that you would
fit,
think
it
was
would just
the
fail.
Powerbox.
Right, you could trick the user into thinking they had granted a capability,
But they
but they
hadn't.
didn't.
Right.
But it's not very
But
useful.
But that's why I said there's no
That can lead
harm.
to data leak.
Right.
There's no harm there.
Which is the thing from earlier where I talked about how this has to be the only way to interact to obtain the sought privilege. This is why.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you could fool the user into entering a thing in something else.
Yeah, on a Windows system, if you have an app running in a guest account and it opens a file dialog box, doesn't matter what file you select, it will only get access to files in its guest directory, right? So there's no point in trying to cheat you that way, and this is the same thing here.
But I thought the question, if I understood it, was basically, can I please style it however I want to? Is that the question?
Yeah.
That might be kind of like the other side of the coin, yeah.
Okay.
So with the inline Powerbox, the app still has full control over what it looks like. Well, except for when an autocomplete thing happens. Then the overlay, that's like the pop-up for selecting an autocomplete, is rendered by Sandstorm, because it's rendering things that the app doesn't know about.
Right.
But the actual input box is rendered by the app in whatever style you want. Now we intend to provide a JavaScript library to embed in there so that you don't have to do everything from scratch. But
Have you guys thought much about in developer as a user? Because, so for instance, if I'm in a REPL-like environment, IPython, or maybe even just a shell, and I type, pip install something, next thing you know, I'm going to want to reach out to an unknown, innumerable set of dependencies that could be any place.
Well, it's not using pip.
Of course, yeah. But the question is, how would a developer who may use developer-level tools work with the Powerbox?
So that's, we kind of say, partly most apps don't need to do that, but for those that do, you could request a IP network, or as soon as you try to socket.listen, request an IP interface. And then you could have a shim which proxies outgoing requests through Cap and Proto through this interface instead. Ashish?
I do have a different answer, which is that there might be an app called pip. You have it all understand from beforehand. And so before IPython sort of works, you need to go install pip, whatever that meant. And so when you're in IPython notebook and you type pip install requests,
Or import XYZ or something.
right, or maybe import MPC, but for now let me pretend it's a pip install. You're typing pip install into this inline Powerbox type thing, and IPython notebook has configured the inline Powerbox so that it'll go ask pip for requests. And pip you pre-authorized to access the whole network, or maybe pip came pre-bundled with a whole copy of the Python package index. So then it can hand just the actual packages, not the network connectivity to the app.
I was asking if you could programmatically do it, exactly that kind of scenario.
we would like for you to be able to, that might take a while.
Doesn't have to happen today.
That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think there were more questions.
Well, if not, thanks so much, everyone, and happy to talk to all of you later. I think we have lightning talks next. All right, thanks. I will surrender.